There could be an incredible fight coming for F1 in the Drivers' Championship in 2026 as George Russell says he wants a piece of Max Verstappen. This is Nailing the Apex. I'm Tim Hauraney, and joining me to unpack George Russell's comments from ViaPlay, it's Nelson Valkenburg. Nelson, thanks for taking the time to do this. You're becoming a podcasting superstar lately.
Well, that is one way of saying it. At least I'm everywhere at the moment, which goes to show that we're all hungry, very hungry for the season to start.
Yeah.
And we're all looking for angles and a little bit of news here and there. And it's always like this just before the season starts. But of course, Nailing the Apex is the favorite.
Oh, look at this. All right. You said the right words. Your check is in the mail. So all is good. I want to start with George Russell's comments from last week. You and I were on the press conference call that he had. And obviously his comments were printed around the world, but he wanted to fight Max Verstappen for a World Drivers' Championship. And I think coming into the start of this whole regulation, myself included, I don't know about you, Nelson, but I had reservations about just how competitive the Red Bull powertrains Ford combination would be for Red Bull, and things that we had heard last season. Things weren't going very well by the sounds of it. But I just came off of speaking with Zach Brown during his press conference here on Monday, taping this at 7:36 a.m. Eastern time. And Zach was saying that, he's pretty impressed by what Red Bull has, and they're actually a little worried about them.
Well, and it just goes to show that these teams have a lot more data than we had definitely from the Barcelona test. And it echoes what Zach said. It echoes what Toto Wolff said last week on that Mercedes meeting that we were both in. They've seen a lot of GPS data, apparently, that points to a rosier picture maybe for the Red Bull Ford powertrains combination, the new project. When we were both in Detroit, it was Mackies who was very careful, very, very careful not to raise the expectations. And this is a different message from the competitors. We don't know what the real situation is, but for both Zach and Toto to say, listen, they'll be in the game, that's a good sign for all of those fans of the Red Bull Ford teams.
Yeah, it's funny because not only was the Mercedes or McLaren camp talking about the Red Bull powertrains, but so too was Toto Wolff. A few of the other teams that I jumped on with were also making mention of just how competitive they think that this Red Bull Ford relationship is going to be. And if Mecky's playing it down to us in Detroit has him thinking that they'll be more competitive in a few months' time. I mean, and already teams are saying like, hey, this team is going to be surprisingly good. Were you shocked by that? Like hearing some of the stuff over last week? Because I kind of was, in all honesty.
For me, not so much, because I also think it's a lot of gamesmanship there. You can also talk up the competition and therefore putting away the spotlight on yourself. But the truth will come out anyway. Once we're in Melbourne and in Shanghai and in Japan, we'll know a little bit better what the real state of affairs is. But for Zach and Toto to say the same thing, there could be something there. But I'm very reluctant to trust team principals to not be political ahead of the season. So let's wait and see.
Well, I mean, we're already sort of starting in that realm with this, trick engine development with the compression ratio and the FIA getting involved, and a lot of the other OEMs now lobbying to try and get the FIA to sort of shut down whatever it is Mercedes has been able to allegedly have been able to do with the compression ratios. And, Toto was asked about all of that during the press conference. He had some rosy words, to say the least. His competitor.
His demeanor was interesting, though, last week. I found him quite combative, a little bit downcast.
Yeah.
Maybe they're trying to not appear arrogant ahead of the season because they started off so well in Barcelona, at least well prepared. But he was combative, and interestingly, he basically says that the other manufacturers have to get their stuff together, and well, not the same word, but he threw down the gauntlet. But how similar is that situation to the porpoising situation of 22 when he tried to get the rules amended because they couldn't emulate what Red Bull did with the control of the underfloor situation. So it's just F1. Every time we have a new rule cycle, we have someone who gets to a good place first, and that's not being illegal. That's doing your homework, and now it seems to be like Mercedes has found a way to get the maximum out of what the regulations allow, and it's up to the rest to either change the rules. That's going to be hard with 2 weeks to go before the season starts, or 3, or accept it and follow suit. And if it was easy, they would have done it already. So that's why they're moaning at this point.
Yeah, Toto Wolff being combative, which is a good word, during that press conference or press availability. It speaks of two things to me. I mean, I think he knows that they have a competitive package, but I think he also knows that there is another team that has a competitive package as well. And I think also on top of all that, I think he hasn't lost sight of his customer teams, including McLaren. Well, and what they're able to do.
McLaren cleaned their clocks for the last 2 years with the same engine. And I think it would be super naive from Toto to think after Barcelona we're there. There's so many iterations of this car still to come before we even start the first race. And they've learned a lot from 22. I think they went into 22 thinking they had invented the best thing since sliced bread, backfired completely, and they're very reluctant to do the same. But circling back to George Russell, with Russell you could see the excitement bubbling up and the opportunity to fight for a world title, not just with Max, but Max is the benchmark driver in this field at the moment. And to be a champion, you have to beat everyone, and you have to beat Verstappen twice probably. And he's relishing this. So they're on this knife edge of being excited, but playing it down. And in that, playing up Red Bull's chances as well and the powertrain's performance, it all fits that same scenario.
How do you think Verstappen's feeling after the 3 days of the shakedown? I mean, obviously this week we're going into our second week of testing in Bahrain, so I guess that would be test 2, because test 1 essentially was in Barcelona for the shakedown, air quotations. But how do you think Max is feeling after the Barcelona shakedown?
I think open-minded. Mostly, I think Red Bull ran a super conservative aerodynamics package in Barcelona. So in terms of performance, there's very little to comment on, low temperatures, etc. So I think some of the fears may have been allayed already. And now you go into Bahrain with more of an open mind maybe and ready to see what is really there in this package. Because I think some questions had been answered for most of the teams, including for Red Bull, but a lot of question marks remain in terms of overall competitiveness, drivability, etc., etc. So it's going to be super important to hit the ground running in Bahrain. But as far as we can tell from the outside mostly, is that there is a general level of optimism within the Red Bull team.
When last time we were last speaking, we had a chance to learn a lot more about the cars, the regulation, maybe how the races were going to look, how they were going to play out. And I just felt it was important for us to relay that to our viewers and listeners. But, a big thing that I kept hearing last week, Nelson, was lift and coast. The internal combustion engine is basically, in a way, helping to give energy to the battery. And Lando Norris, when I was on a press conference with him, spoke about a lot about that last Tuesday. And I think there's going to be tracks where there's going to be probably more lift and coast than others. And there's just not enough energy going into these batteries. So the internal combustion engine is sort of also now will be used as sort of a battery charger at the same time, which I found quite interesting to learn. Granted that it is 50-50, the racing is going to be a lot different, isn't it?
It is going to be massively different. But on the other side, if you look to a race like Monza, if you take an onboard from the race in Monza, the amount of lift and coast the teams had to do from lap 3. We always hear from the onboard radio that Ferrari has to do it, but they all had to do it, even to manage it on the fuel load. I think we underestimate the amount of lift and coast in racing conditions. The previous regulations sort of mandated, but now it is just an extra layer on top of that. It is very unclear from the drivers what to expect, because it's almost a 50-50 split between the drivers on what they expect the racing to be. And I think it will be a little bit mandated by what sort of track we're on. And it will change, because the development curve will be incredibly steep in terms of battery, in terms of drivability, but also harvesting. They're on a journey, these teams.
Yeah.
But there are races going to be, and possibly Melbourne. We've heard some teams say that maybe it should be wet in Melbourne, because we're not quite there yet, not quite ready. Let's not underestimate the scope of the challenge that F1 has given them, but they'll figure it out. And I think if you hear some drivers, they say, well, overtaking is going to be incredibly hard. Others are saying we're going to get really exciting and slightly chaotic races. As long as the show is fine, I'm good.
Yeah, Norris said that quite a bit, actually, when we were talking to him. He'd mentioned that he felt that the races were probably going to be pretty chaotic early on. I think a lot of that has to do with that deployment strategy that I think we're going to be talking a lot about this season is how good. I mean, one of the things, I was speaking with an engineer about this, and one of the things I found super interesting was the fact that the deployment factor in these cars, in these races, even in qualifying, which we can talk about in a minute, but is going to be super important. Having a good deployment system is probably, this person felt, was going to be better than having a good power unit like package.
Probably is.
If you're deploying the energy properly around the lap, then you're more likely to have more competitiveness than you are if you've got a really kick-ass power unit. So
it's almost the same as differential. Because if you had, let's say in the 90s, extremely good power unit, very straightforward V10, but your diff couldn't put the power on the tarmac. It's exactly that. It's just a digital way of looking at it compared to what we're used to in an analog way. Mm-hmm. Or when the first turbo engines came around, massive kick in your backside basically when it came in, but controlling the lag and how it came in what changed the game completely. And this is just a new digital version of that, a new iteration of that. But I am also sensing, I don't know if you feel the same, these teams are so eager to get on top of it. This challenge has motivated them to the core, because it's in the end what F1 is about. And it's going to be super interesting who gets there first. And say Mercedes is best in their power unit, energy harvesting, the whole shabam. Which of those teams gets into the nitty-gritty of deployment? How do you use that extra energy? Mm-hmm. Who is best at that? And well, that could be a huge game changer. We haven't even mentioned how the new fuels will impact the situation.
Oh, exactly. And then also on top of that, the software as well. I mean, heard a lot of teams talk about software, the software capabilities, the software development. A lot of that has to do with like AI and the AI tools, and how can AI help the teams navigate that deployment package. But one of the other things I felt was, quite interesting, but I think it's also going to really reflect how we view the drivers at the same time, is the sim, and how important the sim is now. So before we got to the Barcelona shakedown, these drivers were running on an older design of what the teams thought that these regulations were going to look like. But now, after the shakedown, basically the team's taking all that data, feeding it back into the sim, and that's changed things a lot. And so these drivers are, Norris and Piastri, they were in the sim all last week and running simulations from the new data that they had captured during that Barcelona shakedown. So, Nelson, I think not only is your software, your AI, your engineers have to be on top of everything, but also when you factor in the drivers being in the sim more, I think we are going to be talking about that quite a bit. And how is that driver in loop simulator? How competitive is that measured against all the other teams? Because I think that's going to also play a really big factor.
I think behind the scenes, yes. I've figured out in these 5 years of doing solely F1 commentary and no other motorsports is that come Sunday, whatever you think is important falls away a little bit, because that's with broadcasting, you're really play by play and it's in the back of your mind. Afterwards, when you start to analyze what has happened, then you start to figure out why things have happened. But as long as the Sunday is entertaining, I think a lot of the questions surrounding or the focus upon those elements are more for the teams and for us to understand what's happening. But the average fan won't really lie awake at night about driver in loop simulators, but it will be extremely important. And you'll see that the knowledge base grows, the reality and the sim, they converge a little bit. And then when you hit that convergence, then it'll kickstart a new era of development, because then you can really start racking up the miles in the sim. But yeah, it's easy. And we've had this conversation a lot last year. What the drivers have felt in the sim throughout the year last year, and George Russell said it, was not as reflective of reality that they found in Barcelona. And that's what makes it so interesting.
And I think that also that time in the sim for the drivers is going to be crucial in terms of their preparation, because I think that can win and lose you a race. It can keep you competitive in qualifying, and it can really screw you over if you're not really dialed into making sure you're prepared as much as possible for these scenarios and situations, because I think these drivers are going to enter a lot of different scenarios and situations where they may not be prepared. And so I think that is going to be a huge thing for these drivers, like coming in as prepared as possible, because you get into qualifying, and that was one of the other things that we heard a lot about. Like, it's going to be extremely important. I mean, now granted, qualifying is always extremely important, right? But I think one of the teams had put it that, qualifying will be so important that it could be a disaster for some teams in a weekend. Like, the outlap could really screw you if the driver does it wrong. Just the outlap, not only is there going to be, not only are you going to need to be harvesting on that outlap, but also you're trying to prep the tire at the same time, and that balance is going to be extremely sensitive. And I think once the driver starts the lap, and from what I've learned, even on quali laps, there will be that lift and coast to charge the batteries within a quali lap. And to do that, I think to get that right and how sensitive that sounds like it's going to be, I think qualifying is going to be
extremely cool,
massive, yeah,
extremely fun. And it also is no different to last year, because if someone screwed up their final sector tire warm up, it was 0.7 of a second then. Easily. Depending on the track. It's just almost, again, it's a digital way of looking at the same issue that the drivers are going to face. Yeah. Tires are going to be a large talking point on the side as well, by the way, but that's a whole different podcast. But I think you spend a lot of time in the sim, right?
Yeah.
And what is for you the main difference to being successful in the sim compared to in real life?
for if you haven't been to the track, obviously, I mean, that's huge.
No. I mean, what makes a sim driver great compared to what makes a real life driver great?
The difference between the two of them, I think, is how quickly you can adapt to that, like the virtual world. Like, because the virtual world it feels like you don't have the same feeling. There are certain aspects of the sim world that I can take and put it into the real world, but once you sort of boil it all down, the car characteristics can change quite quickly, and that's another thing that I don't think the sim shows you quick enough. And so I think with a lot of the F1 sims, like if the data that they fed into these machines that's coming from Barcelona, that's going to change again, right? Like when we get through Bahrain testing, like these drivers are going to go through Bahrain testing, and then they're going to go all the way back to the sim, back at the factory, and all the data that they've collected feeds back into the sim. It changes it again. And so for the driver to have to try and get on top of all of that and also manage all these different types of systems, I mean, Nelson, I think, we're going to see a lot of driver error, and that's going to be more so, like, it's going to be pointed out even more so than I think it's ever been.
So I spoke to a lot of sim drivers from different teams, and what they feel is that the discipline you need to be a quick sim racing driver, because you brake at, let's say, 95 meters before the corner. It is not about feel. As a real world driver, you scope out a lot of different things like weather, like temperatures. It's a different way of doing it. With sim driving, you have to be incredibly disciplined. That discipline of telling your body, no, the computer says I need to brake here, turn in here, here, here. That discipline will translate into a deployment, but also a quality lap preparation. It's not going to be about feel. It's about what you and your engineer have figured out is going to work. And you keep to that plan, and then you start your lap. This is why I believe the sim drivers, let's say the current generation of young drivers, Bortoleto, massive opportunity for him this year to really make his mark. But the drivers who can really turn off part of their racing brain that's all about feel and trusting your inner sensors and say, okay, this is now in a sim what I have to do. Those drivers are going to flourish this year.
Yeah, I think so.
And Verstappen is one of them. Bortoleto is one of them. I'm very, very interested to see how a driver like Charles Leclerc, who we know does a lot on feel, by feel, and negotiates corners maybe from corner to corner. I'm very curious how he does it. Same with Piastri. Piastri hasn't shown to me the adaptive capabilities maybe that he needs to. And he's a work in progress, so he can completely surprise me. I've been known to underestimate him, but there is going to be a dividing line between these drivers, and I'm just looking forward to see how they adapt to a new world.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the older drivers adapt to it as well. I mean, Lewis Hamilton wasn't the biggest fan of like the sims, just wasn't. I mean, recently since the 2022 regulation, he spent a lot more time in the sim, and I would say also Fernando Alonso as well. On top of all that,
yeah, now, Alonso has the widest range of experience.
Yes,
and Hamilton has always been extremely disciplined in the way he treats his racing. And one of the problems he had over the last few years is that there was an inconsistency in these cars from corner to corner, wind, and also high and medium speed corners. Car would really behave differently. So it could work out really well for him. You don't necessarily have to be great in the sim or of the sim generation to be great at this. We need to figure out if it fits driver specific skill set.
Well, it's like how quickly can they learn a new way of going racing again? And when I look at Fernando Alonso and his age and everything, but he has the bandwidth, right? I feel that he'll be a driver that, I don't know, maybe he'll struggle like early, but then I think he's one of those drivers that will naturally figure it out catch on and understand how to make it fast. And the same goes with Lewis. But I think those would be the drivers who start off on the back foot a bit more before figuring it out and making the transition forward. Where Max, I think he's already going to be there.
Yeah, Lando Norris, same.
And I also think Piastri as well, just simply because of that work ethic that he has. Like I think he can be one of those drivers who can be there and arrive.
Undeniably, he's one of the hardest workers there.
Yeah,
and he'll figure it out. The question is he adaptable enough to figure it out quickly? But nobody has the answer to that one.
Yeah, no, that's true, and that's one of the things, though, I think that fans should watch out for early on is who's jumping on top of these regulations quickly, and who's going to be one of the first of those sort of the younger generation drivers to sort of get it right early on. I want to talk quickly about the broadcasting. We did have a little bit of a debrief on that. It sounds interesting. Nelson, obviously we do two different things. You're doing a lot of play-by-play and everything. I'm doing a lot more reporting and insider work and trying to, break things down when the race ends and analyze what happens. So we do cover things in different ways for yourself. I mean, what did you take away from our meeting we had there?
So, it is going to be incredibly important to sift through the data and decide what is important for your play-by-play commentary to not overload your viewers, because there's an incredible amount of data and detail that we can go in. And for us to find that balance is going to be important. When it becomes pertinent to the race, we need to have the data and the knowledge at hand. But we have to make a judgment call during the race. And if the race is exciting, that judgment call is super easy. But even then, you'll see some things you're not familiar with, a car slowing down rapidly, whatever, compared to a car behind it. And you have to be able to explain very concisely to a very wide audience what is actually happening there. And that is going to be a journey. We are going to go on a journey. We don't know what the rhythm is of a race. I was in a meeting last week about commercials. So we're a streamer, but we have different packages. Sometimes you are with commercials, sometimes without. But to figure out what is going to be opportune moments for a commercial, first few races is going to be super, super difficult. So in the end, super cool. I'm really looking forward to figuring it out. I'm really looking forward to go to Bahrain and actually see these cars live in action.
Yeah, I think
it's going to be nice.
For me, on my side, it kind of comes more down to, at the end of a race, how did so-and-so, lose a position? How did they drop back? Why did they drop back? And understanding, okay, did they not use the deployment in the right way? And so for me, I find that there's going to be a lot more insider work I'm definitely going to have to do. There's no question about that. But it's understanding what all of it means.
Exactly.
I think it was with the boost mode.
Oh yeah.
There's there's different subsections to.
Well, there is a different way of implementing your boost mode as well. But this is the learning curve we will all have to be on together, and it's a learning curve we've never had to be on.
Yeah,
because in the first year in 22 of the new regulations, we figured out fairly quickly how switched on or off the downforce was in these cars. And that's why we saw some massive accidents in the beginning. We saw how some drivers struggled comparatively more with the 22 car than the 21 car. Nicholas Latifi is one that comes to mind, who didn't have the time to figure a very on or off again Williams out. Mick Schumacher had some really big accidents with a very edgy car. And I'm really looking forward this year to figure out who gets their act together the quickest, but what is the implication for the race. And as you say, you'll have some time to dig in deep. For me, I have to make a snap judgment why something is happening, but I don't have the time to dive deep into it or explain it in detail, because the race just continues. So it is going to be. I think it's going to be quite interesting.
Last thing before I let you go, real quick. Cadillac had their livery unveil last night during the Super Bowl. What did you think?
Meh. Meh.
That's all you got for me.
Well, it should have been yellow. Come on, make a statement. I mean, it looks nice. It looks good. I'm a little concerned how it looks under the lights. It looks classy. It looks very well implemented. Yeah, but I would have really wanted something bold.
I don't know. I thought it was Cadillac. It felt like Cadillac colors to me. That split down the middle of the like shiny white and black mixed with some silver in there. I kind of liked it, Nelson. I mean,
in isolation, it's nice, but it won't stand out super great.
It'll be interesting to see what it looks like under the Bahrain sun. Like it'll look different under that than it does under the night lights of Bahrain as well. So two different things there to look out for when you're there, buddy. But enjoy Bahrain testing. Thanks again for doing this, Nelson. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's keep it going. We thank Nelson for his time and for jumping on with us. Let's continue on talking about Cadillac, the F1 team, because I heard from CEO of TWG Motorsports, Dan Tauris, because the car was running today in Bahrain. It was a promotional day for them, promotional day of filming. So still getting some laps under their belt. However, it wasn't disclosed how much running they actually did. Can do up to 200 kilometers of running, but that information wasn't released. But from what Dan had to say, let's start with the Super Bowl. Let's go back and talk about that, because there is a little bit more around that Super Bowl ad that I would like to discuss. I was going to talk to Nelson about some of it, but I hadn't heard from Dan Tauris at the time that Nelson and I recorded. So I figured, well, wait and hear from him, hear what he has to say, and then update you guys on what's going on. So that Super Bowl ad, there was some misinformation around there that was being spread, that the actual ad was supposed to run at halftime, but something had happened and it got moved to the fourth quarter. That's not correct. So the Super Bowl ad was always supposed to air in the fourth quarter of the game. And being in Canada, so we didn't get to see it up here. Saw it online when it dropped, but didn't see the actual commercial. It sounds like Tauris was pretty happy with when it aired. It sounded like it actually aired right after one of the touchdowns in the fourth quarter. However, there was a story by Rolling Stone that came out just before the commercial aired, like a few hours before the commercial aired on Sunday, that Hollywood director Michael Bay was suing the team for $1.5 million US dollars, as he claims that the ad stole his idea. So Tauris was asked about this. He did respond, and he had said that he was disappointed that Michael Bay had decided to do what he's doing, so to sue them. He said that all of the creative, Dan Tauris said this, that all of the creative was actually done before meeting with Michael Bay. He's confident that this will get resolved amicably, but he wouldn't go into more detail than that. I'm sure that he can't for legal reasons. I mean, if they are going to have to go to court, he's probably going to have to watch what he says, because I'm sure some of this stuff could possibly be used against him. I don't know how all of that works. I am just assuming, but he wouldn't go into further detail on any of it. So some other notes, though, and some things that I learned from the Cadillac F1 team media session. So on the car, you'll notice that it's TWG AI, and it's a huge branding badge that's actually on the car itself. Now, the TWG AI at the moment is the primary sponsor, like the big sponsor for the team. But according to Tauris, TWG AI is actually big business inside of TWG as a whole. Because remember, there is TWG, and then there's TWG Motorsports, which is like an arm of TWG that controls the motorsports side of things. But if you Google TWG, you can take a look at everything that that company actually owns. But Taurus did explain that sponsorship, it's not filler sponsorship. So it's essentially not, taking from one hand and giving it to the other. It is actual sponsorship. So probably a lot of B2B opportunities for that business around the globe, potentially, having your own hospitality suites. And if you are a sponsor of a team, you then can go and invest into hospitality. You can bring people in from other companies, schmooze them and try and sell them your product, or have them take a look at your product. So whatever the AI actually works on itself can actually be used as a way of making more money by selling that product from around the world. It's what, I don't know if they're still calling it B2B, but when I was racing, that's what we would call a B2B play. It would be business to business, not business to consumer. Taurus also felt that in a couple of years that the team will be making some money. Obviously now they're operating at a very big deficit. They've spent a lot on capital expenditure. I've seen the factory, the one that's in Silverstone. They do have a few factories, but they have spent quite a bit on CapEx. And then obviously paying the drivers, obviously building the car, and then recruiting as well, quite aggressively, but at the same time trying to match salaries of other engineers that other teams are trying to get can be quite competitive. So he feels like they should be doing well with the team actually making money in a few years time. And I think if they get some more branding on the car, if they're able to eventually do well in the constructors and start to accrue a lot of that money back, and since there is the cost cap there, they should do well. Now, when we take a look at the other side of things, because then you'll be like, okay, Tim, but they're also building an engine. But GM is the one who's doing that, right? Like that's supposed to be GM's thing. They're the ones who have it set up that they will be the ones in charge of building out the Cadillac power unit. Taurus was asked about that, and he did confirm that they were on track to develop and have out on the track their own power unit by 2029. So they will be buying those Ferrari engines until they get theirs built. So they've got quite a bit of time, obviously, and sinking a lot of money into that R&D for them to build out that new power unit. And again, like we'll see what happens with this regulation, right? Like I've been saying on here, I mean, we haven't really seen these cars in action with this new regulation just yet. Let's see how it plays out after a few years. And then I think you'll start to see teams and OEMs make some decisions on if they want to continue down this path or go down another path. And if they end up going down another path, and if you're GM, you're going to have to try and pivot as quickly as you can. Let's switch topics, talk about McLaren really quickly. Spoke with Zach Brown real early on Monday morning, like 5 a.m. was an early call. But yes, hearing from Zach was good. And like Nelson and I had talked about off the top of the show, he really felt that Red Bull powertrains was a good engine. Felt that they were going to be very strong. Thinks that, for themselves, they've got work to do, but I think he feels that they can pick up not where they left off from last season, but close to it. I think they can as well. I think they've got the right structure put in place for that. And look, like they're buying Mercedes engines, gearbox. So whatever is going to happen with Mercedes, if they are competitive, good, it's going to be good for McLaren, whatever happens with Mercedes power units in terms of them being very competitive. The launch was good. I liked it. The car, I thought it was going to be a little different in terms of the livery. And, I see what, McLaren is doing by keeping it consistent with the papaya. However, I really liked the livery that they had on their car for their Barcelona shakedown. I like that more than I like the car that I saw today. It looked awesome. That Barcelona shakedown livery they had on. I know it wasn't like anything out of this world. It wasn't. I just liked it. I thought it looked really sharp. It looked cool. Had a little splash of orange, like papaya, on it with a lot of black and some other things. I thought it was good. The overalls, I liked last year's overalls better, like their race worn kit, than the ones that debuted today. One of the things that I am looking forward to see if McLaren does this season is like a special livery, like a one-off, because usually when they start doing their one-off liveries, they usually nail those like that. Like again, like the one in Barcelona for the shakedown. I mean, I thought that thing was sick. Like I'd love it if they brought that back. Later on Monday, Aston Martin did their livery unveiling. Well, when they were finally able to get their stream up and running, we saw their livery. It was a pretty rough out of the gates for Aston Martin's livery unveiling. The digital show that they put on YouTube was late airing, like probably by 30 minutes. And then once it got going, the audio was a bit out of sync. And then I think something must have happened. Something like a server must have crashed or something, because we lost picture and sound probably about 10 minutes in when Fernando and Lance were being interviewed. And then it took another 10 minutes to try and get the stream back up and running. And then once it got back up and running, it was pretty cool to see the Hans Zimmer and the Aston Martin video that got like put together. It looked like a movie. The music was incredible. It was like very emotive music. It was really, really well done. And then, we got to see the car. We didn't see that, so we saw the car get debuted in Barcelona for the shakedown, all in black. But on Monday, we just saw the livery. We didn't see the actual like AMR 26 with the livery on it. And we're not going to see that until like Bahrain testing. And so, that was a little disappointing for me. I wanted to see an actual car get unveiled, but I do understand that these cars had to get to Bahrain to be put together and get ready for testing, which is going to take place on Wednesday. And this was happening on a Monday in Saudi Arabia. And so the logistics of it just wasn't going to work out. However, that being said, I like the livery. Look, I'm a sucker for Aston Martin Racing Green. I've been open on this show many times that the DB7, when I was a kid, that was like my dream car. Like when I was like 10 years old, I tried to get my dad to sell the house so we could live in the Aston Martin DB7. So, that car for me was like the car, and that was, Aston Martin British Racing Green. And now that neon yellow pinstripe that runs through the car as well. I think that's a really classy touch. I like it a lot. I like the overalls as well. The drivers' overalls, they look sharp this year. Last year's I wasn't a big fan of. I didn't think the race suits were that good. But this year, their new stuff looks really sharp. Now let's hope the car is quick, but we'll talk about that in a second, because I did hear from Fernando Alonso, and I got to speak with Lance Stroll on Monday as well. And I think this team may be in for a really tough start to the season. And let me explain why. There is a lot of work that still needs to be done. Not only with the car, which, I mean, it's amazing that they got this car to the track in Barcelona. I think it was a bit of a letdown how late it was brought to the track and debuted. However, that's that case of trying to push that development envelope as late as possible. Like really trying to push it as late as possible to where you're not making some of these big moments, like the boxes that need to be ticked, like getting to a shakedown and running for 3 days. So not only, with the car, which, will have some pretty aggressive, I think, update packages throughout the season. And I think the rate of development with these cars this year is going to be, very, very high. I think the second half, and this is, Fernando was talking about this as well on Monday, the second half of the season is going to be really crucial in this championship as a whole. So I think for Aston Martin, they've left that ramp up rate, till later in the season. So updating the car aggressively with big updates, stuff like that, we're not probably going to see until later in the season. So I think they get to the track in Bahrain. They have a solid test with what they have, with what they brought to Barcelona. They get some more data on what they've got. And then that car comes to Australia. May not change too dramatically from Bahrain testing to Australia. There may be some tweaks here or there. Lance had told me that they'll probably add. And then I think later in the season, we will see like what type, we will see big updates on this car later in the season. And I think we'll see what type of a season it's going to be for this team then. I mean, obviously we can easily judge them when the season starts. And I think this is a very big season, not only for the team itself, because you go out and you spend all this money, you get Adrian Newey, you bring him to the team, and he's got to start late, and I'll touch on that in a second. However, your two drivers haven't had the greatest car to drive, but now if Adrian's able to give them a car that will eventually be good, then both of these drivers are going to really have to like perform well, because I think the Honda power unit is a bit behind. And I think that could be a long while for Honda in this season to catch up. I think Honda deciding late that they were wanting to come back for this regulation, come back into Formula One, I think that may have put them on the back foot a bit. And then with Adrian Newey starting in March of last year, that's putting your development behind as well, because most teams would have started Jan 1. And so if Aston Martin is starting Jan 1, well, Newey's not there, right? And he's the big dog, right? He's the one who's going to come in. He's going to be your alpha on the aerodynamics. And if he comes in March 1 and he sees, what have you guys been working on? And he looks, and if he looks at it and he's like, no, then you're kind of starting from scratch. You're starting 3 months behind. So that's how, for Aston Martin, why I say this thing could get off to a rough start, because I do think that they are 3 months behind. Now, if, however, he's built a rocket ship, then they're really going to have to hope that Honda's power unit really comes on strong later in the season, in that second half of the season, where I think for the teams that started late, or the teams that are late in their development, are probably going to make a big push. And once that happens, then I think we're going to see the field change change quite a bit. It will be fascinating. It's going to be following this team this season I think is going to be very interesting. They've got a lot of high caliber talent on this team now, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of expectation on them over the next few seasons. Judging them extremely harshly straight out of the gate, I don't think that's going to work out because of when everyone got started, right? There is that 3-month period, and then you have Honda signing up a little later with this regulation and getting started a little later. They have a lot of gains. They have a lot of gains to make. So we'll see with Aston Martin as their season goes, because I think it's going to be a really fascinating story to follow them for sure. Sorry the pod is so late, everybody. I know usually these are out early on Monday morning. However, there was so much stuff that was coming out on Monday, and I wanted to make sure that, I got all this information to you, the listener, the viewer, as fast as I could. And so in doing so, I had to delay when we were going to put this one out. But yeah, thanks so much everybody for watching and listening though. Like I'm pretty excited in these winter months when there hasn't been much F1 going on, like on track stuff. I've been really happy with, everyone's engagement with the show. The viewership has been great. The numbers it's really exciting to see us have like a really stable viewership record going. It's nice to see. We put a lot of effort into this, especially the guys behind the scenes like Justin Fisher and Hayden Matheson and Adam as well. Like, we put a ton of work into this thing. Adam's going to be back on the show. He is having to take a bit of a break from us at the moment because he's got a lot of other things going on at the moment. But Adam is going to come back. He will be back for the first race of the season. And actually, I was with Adam for a bit on, what day was it? Saturday? I think it was this past Saturday. Yeah, it's this past Saturday. I was with Adam. We were doing headshots, so photos. Like, and I don't get headshots at all. Like, I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, I find it really weird and awkward to get my picture taken. And people will be like, well, you're on TV. Like, you're on TSN, like, talking about Formula One. I'm like, yes. I'm like, that's fun. I really enjoy that. And I enjoy doing this pod and just talking into a camera. I mean, that's fine. I can do that. But like to stand awkwardly and like smile and like, yeah, show us your smile. Let's see that smile. You're just like, it's awkward for me, man. I just think it's, yeah. And I don't think it's too photogenic either. So it's just like, okay, you're going to have a lot of Photoshop to do on your hands, buddy. Okay. I'll tell you that right now. So, but yeah, anyways, I saw Adam or whatever. We were chatting. I told him like, hey, look, buddy, I think you're going to have a lot of work to do when you come back because there's a lot for you to learn. So Adam and I are going to have a brainstorming session when I get back from Bahrain testing. And I'll be I'm going to try and put out some podcasts when I'm over in Bahrain as well. So I can try and update all of you sort of on a daily basis of what happens. So I'm flying out next Sunday. And I think I land. When do I land? I land in Bahrain like I think it's Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday afternoon. Bahrain time is when I land. And because I've got a 7-hour flight to Paris, I think. And then I think I've got a 3-hour layover and then another 7-hour flight direct to Bahrain. And should be in there on Tuesday. Wednesday, head to the track for the final week of testing. And so we'll get that done. And so, yeah, I will try and put out some smaller podcasts sort of each day. Just downloading to all of you what I learned, what happened, what do the cars look like, what they sound like, who looks competitive, because by the time we get to that final week of testing, their cars are actually going to be running a lot more performance mileage in terms of outright pace. I mean, we won't know fuel loads and things of that nature and like engine modes, but they will be push laps. So we'll have an idea as to where everybody is. I'll try and get another podcast to everyone for next Monday. Other than that, thanks very much, everybody, for watching and listening. Really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.